Right now, somewhere in your bathroom, there's an object you use twice a day without ever really looking at it. You don't think about it. You don't wonder about it. You just grab it, scrub for 30 seconds, rinse, done. But here's the thing, that little plastic stick in your cup has a body count attached to it. It has a suicide attached to it. It has kings and prisoners, and a Zen monk and a chemist who thought he was a failure right after he changed the world. It has a plant that can either save your teeth or kill your enemy. I'm talking about the toothbrush. And by the end of this video, you are never going to look at yours the same way again. Let's go back, way back. We have to start about 5,500 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, because that's where archaeologists found the oldest evidence of humans actually caring about their teeth on purpose. Not brushing like we do chewing. They'd take a twig, usually from a tree called Salvadora persica, and they'd chew one end of it until it split apart into soft little fibers. Then they'd scrub their teeth with that frayed end. The other end, sharpened to a point, doubled as a toothpick. Here's the detail almost nobody tells you. That tree is still called the toothbrush tree today, and it's not just some random twig. It's loaded with natural compounds, things that fight bacteria, that actually help protect enamel. Ancient people didn't know the chemistry. They just knew it worked. And in parts of Africa, the Middle East and South Asia, people are still using it right now, in 2026, chewing on that same twig their ancestors chewed on 5,000 years ago. But here's where it gets a little darker, and this is the part that really messes with me. The same tree, the same bark, the same stems, if you concentrate it, if you age it just right, produces a paralytic compound, a poison. Historically, in some regions, extracts from that plant were used not to clean teeth, but to quietly get rid of an enemy. So this toothbrush tree has spent thousands of years living a double life. In one hand, it's hygiene. In the other hand, it's murder. Let that sit for a second. The oldest toothbrush on Earth might also be one of the oldest poisons. And it wasn't just Mesopotamia. Cavemen, actual Stone Age humans, have been found with grooves worn into their teeth from picking at them with plant fibers. And in Slovenia, archaeologists found a filled tooth, a filling, 6,500 years old, made of beeswax. Somebody, 6,000 years before anesthesia, before X-rays, before modern dentistry existed in any form, sat down and packed wax into a broken tooth to stop the pain. Somebody was in agony long before any of us, and they figured out a fix with what they had. That's not a fun fact. That's a human being suffering thousands of years ago, solving the exact same problem you solved last time you had a cavity. Fast forward to China, somewhere around the Tang dynasty, between the years 600 and 900. This is where the bristle brush, as we'd recognize it, actually shows up for the first time. And it's a strange origin. It comes from hogs. Specifically, hogs living in the freezing cold of Siberia and northern China. Cold weather makes hog hair grow stiff and coarse, almost bristle-like, and someone realized those stiff hairs, jammed into little holes drilled into bone or bamboo, made a genuinely functional brush. We even have documentation of this. A Japanese Zen master named Dogen Kegan, traveling through China in the year 1223, wrote about watching Chinese monks using these bristle brushes to clean their teeth. Think about that for a second. A monk in the 1200s took the time to write down what he saw people doing with their teeth because it was that unusual, that noteworthy. A 13th century travel journal has a paragraph about dental hygiene in it. By 1498, this design had become widespread enough in Ming Dynasty China that it's often credited as the true birth of the bristle toothbrush bone or bamboo handle, stiff pig bristles from a hog's neck, packed into drilled holes. And here's the twist. This thing traveled. European explorers and traders brought the design back home. But Europeans, when they got their hands on it, mostly rejected the hog bristles. Too coarse, too harsh on the gums, so they swapped it out for horsehair instead. Horsehair is hollow on the inside, which means it's basically a tiny tube, a perfect little tunnel for bacteria to move in and set up permanent residence. So for centuries, cleaning your teeth in Europe often meant scrubbing them with a brush that was quietly breeding bacteria the entire time. People thought they were being hygienic. They were, in a very real sense, making things worse. During the Middle Ages, oral hygiene in Europe basically collapsed. People believed tooth decay was caused by something called toothworms, actual invisible worms burrowing into your teeth and eating them from the inside. That belief stuck around in various forms for centuries. Instead of brushing, people mostly used their fingers, or rags dipped in salt and soot, or sharpened quills as makeshift toothpicks. And then you get to Queen Elizabeth of England in the late 1500s. Sugar had just become available to European aristocracy, imported at enormous expense, and eating a lot of it wrecked people's teeth. Elizabeth's teeth reportedly went black and rotten from sugar consumption, and instead of this being a source of embarrassment, it became a status symbol. If your teeth were black, it meant you could afford sugar, a luxury the poor simply didn't have access to. So wealthy people in Britain, wanting to look rich, started deliberately blackening their own healthy teeth to fake the appearance of a sugar-heavy diet. Sit with that. An entire class of people intentionally rotting the appearance of their teeth on purpose as a flex. Dental decay as a fashion statement. It's one of the strangest beauty trends in human history, and it happened because of something as simple as who could afford dessert. The year is 1770. William Addis is a rag merchant in London, and he gets caught up in a riot. Some accounts say he actually started it, and he's thrown into Newgate prison. Miserable place. And every single morning, like every other prisoner, he's expected to clean his teeth the same way most of Europe still did at the time. Rubbing a rag covered in soot and salt across his gums. Gritty, foul, barely effective. One day, sitting in his cell, he looks over and sees a broom in the corner. Something clicks. He picks up a bone left over from a meal. Some versions of the story say it was saved from dinner, and he manages to drill a series of small holes into it. Then he gets a prison guard to give him some bristles, ties them into small tufts, threads them through the holes and seals them in with glue. That's it. That's the modern toothbrush, invented by a rioter in a jail cell out of a dinner bone and stolen bristles. When Addis gets released, he doesn't go back to selling rags. He starts mass-producing his invention. His company, eventually called Wisdom Toothbrushes, makes him a genuinely wealthy man. And here's a detail that still gets me. That company, built from a bone in a prison cell, stayed in his family and stayed in business until 1996. 226 years. A single moment of prison boredom turned into a business empire that outlived the Cold War. Here's an angle almost nobody covers. The toothbrush's history is tangled up with military history. In 1899, Britain was recruiting men for the Boer War in South Africa, and army officials were horrified by what showed up recruits who were malnourished, underdeveloped, and riddled with dental problems. Bad teeth weren't just gross to the officers, they were a national security concern. Soldiers with rotten teeth couldn't properly chew hardtack rations, couldn't maintain nutrition, couldn't function at full strength. Suddenly, the British Army started actively distributing toothbrushes and hygiene instructions to soldiers. Brushing your teeth stopped being a personal choice and became a matter of military readiness. Then World War I happens, and it reshapes the toothbrush again, this time by accident. Bone, which had been the standard toothbrush handle material for over a century, suddenly became too valuable to waste on bathroom accessories. Every animal bone was needed for soup, for food, for a starving wartime population. So manufacturers pivoted to a new material, celluloid, one of the first mass-produced plastics. The modern plastic toothbrush handle exists, in part, because a war made bone too precious to spare. And then, World War II closes the loop entirely. Nylon bristles had just been invented, but most Americans still weren't in the daily habit of brushing. It was the military that changed that soldiers were required to maintain oral hygiene as part of basic training, and when millions of servicemen came home in 1945, they brought that daily ritual with them into ordinary American life. The twice-a-day brushing habit that feels so automatic to you right now. A huge part of why it's automatic is because of a global war. In the 1930s, a brilliant chemist named Wallace Carruthers was working at DuPont, leading a research team, and in 1935 that team succeeded in creating something new, a synthetic superpolymer, nylon. It would go on to reshape entire industries' stockings, parachutes, rope, and yes, toothbrush bristles, finally replacing centuries of animal hair with something stronger, more hygienic, and endlessly reproducible. In 1938, DuPont released the first nylon-bristled toothbrush, marketed as Dr. West's Miracle Tuft toothbrush. But Wallace Carruthers never got to see any of that unfold. He suffered from severe depression for years, privately convinced that his life's work amounted to nothing, that he was a failure despite what he'd built. In 1937, just 2 years after inventing the material that would go on to touch billions of human mouths every single morning, for the next century he took his own life. The man who created the thing sitting in your bathroom cup right now died believing he'd accomplished nothing. That's the part of toothbrush history that never makes it into the dentist's office pamphlet. Behind almost every mundane object in your life, there's a person, and sometimes that person's story doesn't get a happy ending, even when the thing they made changes the world forever. The story keeps moving. In 1939, the first electric toothbrush is developed, and by some accounts it comes out of Switzerland. The version that actually catches on in America arrives in 1960, marketed under the name Broxident by a company called Squibb, using a small motor to spin the brush head. Slow to catch on at first, but eventually becoming the standard in millions of homes. And today, there are more than 3,000 active patents just for toothbrushes in the United States alone. People are still, right now, in labs trying to reinvent this object that started as a chewed-up twig by the Euphrates River 5,000 years ago.